The sky above Zarthan 3 was dark with smoke, filled with flashing lights from ships still firing their final rounds. Explosions shook the ground, and the air smelled like fire and metal. Sergeant Caleb Voss moved through the ruined city with a heavy rifle in his hands, his armor cracked and dirty. His leg was bleeding, and the pain was sharp, but he kept moving. He had to. This was the last push of the war, the final battle that would decide it all. Caleb had been fighting for years. He'd joined Earth's army young, full of pride and dreams. But now he was 34, tired, and full of memories he wished he could forget. He had seen friends die, civilians scream, and beautiful cities turned into piles of rubble. War had taken too much from him. His sleep, his smile, and soon, maybe even his life. That day, as the sun tried to break through the smoke, the enemy surrendered. The Zarthan government, what was left of it, sent out a signal of peace. The war was over. Caleb didn't cheer like some of the younger soldiers. He just sat down on a broken wall, removed his helmet, and looked up at the gray sky. One of the younger officers came over to help him with his injured leg. "You made it," the officer said. "Barely," Caleb replied with a tired smile. Within days, Earth troops were called back. Caleb was taken to a field hospital where doctors tried to save his leg. But the damage was too much. They replaced it with a smart prosthetic, a metal limb with smooth movements and pain sensors turned off. He walked again, but it wasn't the same. Back on Earth, people celebrated. News channels showed images of human flags raised over alien cities. Politicians gave speeches about peace and sacrifice, but for the soldiers, it wasn't easy to adjust. Caleb, now officially discharged, was one of them. He received medals and a quiet thank you, but no one could give him back what he'd lost. He packed his things from the military base, just a small duffel bag with a few clothes and an old photo of his squad. Before he could leave, an officer stopped him and handed him a sealed envelope. "What's this?" Caleb asked. "Legal document. Tribunal order. You're named in it," the officer said, then walked away. Confused, Caleb opened the envelope. The paper inside was stamped with both Earth and Zarthan symbols. It said that, under a wartime agreement, made by a Zarthan noble named Lord Vale, Sergeant Caleb Voss had been granted ownership of one of the noble's household assets. The name of the asset was listed as Scifi. He read the paper again and again, thinking it was some kind of joke or mistake, but it wasn't. During the war, some of the higher-ranking Zarthan had made secret deals to save themselves. Lord Vale had been killed before the war ended, and in his will, he had written that one of his personal attendants should be handed over to the soldier who saved his estate from being destroyed. That soldier had been Caleb. He crumpled the paper in, his hand inside. "I didn't ask for this," he muttered. The next day, he was brought to a small government facility where a few surviving Zarthan civilians were being processed. The room was clean but cold. Behind a glass wall, Caleb saw her for the first time. Scifi stood silently in a corner. She was clearly not human. Her skin had a pale glow, almost like moonlight. Her long, silver-white hair fell gently over her shoulders. She was tall and graceful, with sharp features that looked both delicate and strong. Her eyes, a deep violet color, stared at nothing. When they called her name, she stepped forward without speaking. She didn't look at Caleb at first. But when she did, there was no fear, no anger, just quiet acceptance. A translator spoke for her. "I belong to you now. I will serve." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You don't belong to anyone." She tilted her head, confused. Caleb looked at the officer nearby. "I don't want this. I didn't fight a war to become someone's master." The officer shrugged. "She's legally yours. You can try to free her, but with their society in ruins, there's no system to protect her. If you don't take her, someone else will." Caleb looked back at Sayila. She stood calmly, like this was normal. Maybe it was, in her world. But to him, it felt wrong. He made a decision. Fine, he said. She comes with me, but she's not my property. She stays as a guest until I figure out what to do. And just like that, their strange connection began. Not one of power or ownership, but one of responsibility and confusion. On the long ship ride back to Earth, Caleb kept his distance. He didn't know how to talk to her, and she barely spoke. She followed orders silently, never asked questions, never smiled. Sometimes he caught her staring out the window at the stars, her face full of thoughts he couldn't understand. He watched her too. Not because of how she looked, but because she reminded him of himself, lost, quiet, and unsure of the future. They were two strangers, both shaped by a war they hadn't started. One a soldier who had given too much, the other a servant who had never been free. What would happen next, neither of them knew. But for now, they were heading to the same place, with the same broken pieces in their hands. And maybe, just maybe, they would help each other learn how to put those pieces back, together. The city was busy, loud and full of lights when Caleb returned to Earth. People walked fast. Cars flew above the streets. Life had moved on while he had been fighting on distant planets. Now, with Sayila quietly walking behind him, Caleb felt like a stranger in his own world. They arrived at his small apartment in the older part of the city. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms, plain walls, and old furniture, but it was peaceful and quiet, far away from noise and crowds. He opened the door and stepped aside, letting Sayila enter first. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning everything. Her hands were held together in front of her chest. She didn't ask questions. She didn't touch anything. She simply stood near the door and waited, like she was still inside a noble's house. "You can sit," Caleb said, trying not to sound too harsh. "You don't have to stand like that." Sayila looked at the chair, then at him. "I will stand until I'm told." "To rest?" she said softly. Caleb rubbed his forehead. He was tired, and this was harder than he expected. "I'm not your master, Sayila. You're safe here. You don't have to wait for orders." She gave a small nod, but didn't sit. Caleb walked to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. He gave one to her. She took it with both hands and bowed slightly before drinking. Her movements were slow and quiet, almost like a trained dancer. Caleb sat down and watched her. There was something sad in the way she moved, something heavy behind her careful eyes. The days that followed were strange. Caleb tried to treat her like a guest. He gave her a room, showed her how the shower worked, how to use the food heater, and where the clothes were. But Sayila still acted like she was serving someone. She woke up early to clean the rooms, folded his clothes without being asked, and waited silently until he spoke first. At first, Caleb let her do what she wanted. Maybe it made her feel calm. Maybe it helped her adjust. But as the days passed, it began to bother him. Not because she was doing chores, but because she never smiled, never relaxed, never acted like a person with freedom. One evening, Caleb found her sitting on the floor of her room, brushing her long silver hair with slow, even strokes. He knocked gently on the doorframe. "Hey," he said, "can I talk to you for a second?" She looked up and stood at once, setting the brush aside. "No, please. Sit," he said, holding up his hand. "You don't need to stand every time I speak." She slowly lowered herself back down. Caleb stepped into the room and sat across from her. The room was neat, empty of any decoration. "The bed was perfectly made. You don't have to clean the house," he said. "I didn't bring you here to work for me." "But I was given to you," she said in her quiet voice. "That is my role. It is what I know." He shook his head. "What they did on Zarthan, how they treated people like property. It's Not right. I don't believe in that. You're not an object, Ciela. You're a person. She looked at him with calm eyes, but her face showed confusion. You speak as if I have a choice. You do, Caleb said. You're not my servant. You don't owe me anything. She was silent for a long moment, then asked, Then why did you take me? I didn't want to, Caleb admitted. They said if I didn't, someone else would. Someone worse. I just wanted you to be safe. That answer seemed to surprise her. Her hands folded in her lap, and she looked down. Thank you, she said, in a voice so soft it almost disappeared in the air. They didn't say much more that night, but something small changed after that. The next morning, Ciela didn't clean the living room. Instead, she sat by the window, looking outside at the street below. Caleb watched her from the kitchen. She wasn't smiling yet, but she wasn't standing at attention either. Days turned into weeks. Caleb returned to work, a part-time security job at a cargo terminal. It wasn't exciting, but it paid enough. Every evening, he came home to find Ciela reading the translation tablet he had given her. She studied Earth's language, asking simple questions, learning grammar and speech. Caleb helped her when he could. Their conversation started short but grew slowly. They talked about food, weather, and Earth's cities. Then, one night, she asked him about war. You fought many battles, she said. Did you always believe you were right? He paused, thinking. No, not always. I believed I had to protect my people, but the longer I fought, the more I wondered what we were really doing. She nodded. On my world, we were taught that humans were cruel, that they would destroy us if we didn't fight. Caleb looked at her. Maybe we both believed lies. There was silence again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. As weeks passed, Ciela began to show small signs of change. She started cooking, not because she felt forced to, but because she liked trying human recipes. She wore earth clothes instead of her old silver robe. She even made a joke once, and Caleb had laughed harder than he had in months. But sometimes, at night, he still heard her cry softly through the wall. And sometimes she found him sitting alone on the balcony, staring at the sky, lost in memory. They were both healing. But healing was slow. They didn't know what their future held. But in that small apartment, a soldier and an alien girl, once, enemies by chance, were learning how to live in peace, not as master and servant, but as two broken people trying to become whole again. The weather had turned cold. Rain fell softly against the apartment windows as Caleb sat on the couch, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. He stared at the silent TV screen. He had turned it off after only a few minutes. The news was the same every day. Politicians arguing, cities rebuilding, soldiers forgotten. His leg ached. Not the metal one, but the ghost of the real one that was gone. Phantom pain, the doctors called it. But to Caleb, it felt real enough. Some nights, the pain kept him awake. Other nights, it was the memories, explosions, screams, silence. He heard soft footsteps. Ciela entered the room carrying 2 cups of hot tea. She offered one to him without a word. Caleb took it with a quiet, "Thanks." She sat across from him, her eyes watching the rain outside. Her silver hair was tied back now, the way he had shown her, and she wore a long gray sweater over soft pants. She looked almost like an ordinary girl, except for the faint glow of her skin and the deep purple of her eyes. "You sleep little," she said softly. "Yeah," Caleb answered. "The dreams don't let me." She nodded. "On Zarthan, after a battle, my brothers would sit in silence for days. They said nothing but carried a heaviness inside. I was told not to speak to them until the heaviness passed. I don't think it ever really passes," Caleb said, taking a sip of tea. "You just get used to carrying it." Ciela looked down at her cup. I remember their faces, all of them, everyone who died in the last year. I do too. There was no need for more words. That moment was enough. Two people from different worlds, both carrying the weight of war. As the days moved forward, their quiet friendship continued to grow. Caleb started going to therapy twice a week. It was required for veterans, though. Most didn't take it seriously. But Caleb went anyway. He didn't always talk much, but just sitting in the room helped. It reminded him he wasn't the only one struggling. Scifi had started to explore the city during the day. She wore a hooded coat to hide her features, not out of shame, but for safety. Not everyone on Earth liked aliens, even peaceful ones. People stared sometimes, but she kept her head down. She often visited the city library, where a kind, older woman named Mrs. Langston helped her check out books using a guest pass. Scifi read about human history, languages, and justice systems. One day, she came home with a children's book about Earth's first civilizations and sat on the floor, reading it aloud to herself. Caleb watched her from the kitchen, smiling, quietly. "You like learning?" he said. "It helps me understand your world," she replied. "And it helps me think about mine." He nodded. "What do you think so far?" She closed the book gently. "I think your people are complicated. Brave and cruel, kind and proud. You have done great things. You've also made many mistakes." Caleb chuckled. "Sounds about right." Later that week, something changed. Caleb came home from work and found the apartment door slightly open. His instincts kicked in. He dropped. His bag pulled out the emergency stun baton from behind the shelf and stepped inside. The living room was a mess. Drawers were open. Scifi's books were on the floor. The window was cracked. He moved quickly to her room and found her huddled in the corner, shaking. Her cheek was bruised and her breathing was fast. "Scifi!" He rushed to her side. "What happened?" "3 men," she whispered. "They broke the lock. I tried to stop them." "Did they take anything?" She shook her head. "They wanted me. Said they could sell me. Said no one would stop them." Caleb's jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists. He called the authorities, but they came hours later, slow and uninterested. The report was taken, a promise was made, but Caleb saw in their eyes that nothing would come of it. Scifi was not a citizen. She had no legal rights, and even though she had done nothing wrong, the law did not protect her. That night, Caleb sat on the balcony, heart heavy with guilt. Scifi joined him after some time, her face still swollen. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought you'd be safe here." "I'm not angry," she replied. "I knew something like this could happen." "But it shouldn't have," Caleb said. "You don't deserve this." She looked up at the stars. "On Zarthan, I never expected to be free. I never expected to feel anything but fear. But here, I started to believe I could be more than what I was trained to be." "You are more," Caleb said. She turned toward him. "Then help me prove it. Help me become someone they cannot hurt again." That night, Caleb made a decision. He would not just hide her away or protect her quietly. He would stand beside her. He would fight for her right to be seen, not as property, not as an alien, but as a person. The next morning, they went to the Office of Interplanetary Affairs. They sat in a waiting room for hours. They filled out endless forms. Most of the staff were confused by her status. Some were rude, but they didn't stop. Caleb wrote letters to veterans groups, contacted a local news channel, and found a young lawyer willing to help. A movement had started in small corners of Earth, people demanding fair treatment for alien refugees and displaced survivors of war, and in the middle of it all was Scifi, not as a servant, not as someone hidden, but as someone learning how to stand on her own. Life had changed a lot for Caleb and Scifi, but danger had not disappeared. One cold evening, just as the sun was setting and the city's lights started to glow, Caleb returned home from his job feeling tired but ready to relax. The air smelled like rain, and soft clouds covered the sky. As Caleb walked up the stairs to his apartment, he noticed something strange. His front door was not fully closed. A small crack showed the inside was darker than usual. His heart beat faster. He reached slowly for the door handle and pushed it open, holding his breath. Inside, the apartment was quiet but not peaceful. The living room was messy. Chairs were knocked over. A few papers lay scattered on the floor. Caleb's eyes searched the room quickly. Something was wrong. From the hallway, he heard a soft noise. It was coming from the bedroom. He moved toward the sound carefully, trying not to make a sound. When he reached the door, he saw Scifi sitting on the floor. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs, and her face was pale and bruised. She looked up when she heard him and tried to smile, but the pain was clear in her eyes. Caleb knelt beside her, his voice low but firm. "Scifi, what happened?" She took a deep breath. "Some men came. They tried to take me. They said they would sell me to others." Caleb's hands clenched tightly. His eyes burned with anger, but he stayed calm. "Did you call for help?" She nodded. "I tried, but by the time anyone came, they were gone." Caleb looked around the room and saw signs of a struggle. The broken lock on the door told him someone had forced their way inside. This was no random crime. It was planned. Someone wanted Scifi for herself or to sell her to others who didn't care about her as a person. This was the dangerous side of life for someone like Scifi, an alien with no legal protection on Earth. The next day, Caleb went with Scifi to the local police station. The officers listened to their story, took photos of her bruises, and wrote a report. But Caleb saw the doubt in their eyes. They didn't fully believe that Scifi was a victim. To many on Earth, aliens like Scifi were strange, and some even thought of them as less than human. After leaving the police station, Caleb took Scifi to a small cafe. They sat in silence for a while, drinking warm tea. "This shouldn't happen to you," Caleb said quietly. "No one should live in fear like this." Scifi looked down at her cup. "I was born into a world where I never had freedom. I was trained to obey, to serve. But here, I thought I could be more." Caleb reached out and gently touched her hand. "You are more. You're a person with rights, and I'm going to help make sure people see that." Caleb spent the next weeks reaching out to others. He contacted veteran groups and human rights organizations. He told Scifi's story to reporters and asked for help from lawyers who understood alien refugee rights. Slowly, more people began to listen. There were meetings, phone calls, and emails. Scifi spoke in public for the first time. Her voice was soft but clear as she explained what it was like to be caught between two worlds, one that treated her as property and another that didn't yet know how to protect her. Her bravery inspired many, but not everyone was happy. Some groups protested, saying aliens should not have the same rights as humans. Some politicians avoided the topic, afraid of losing votes. Still, Caleb and Scifi kept going. They pushed for changes in the law to protect aliens like her, those who had suffered because of war and had nowhere else to go. The pressure grew, and the government finally agreed to hold a special tribunal to decide Scifi's status. Caleb was called to testify. He stood before the council, dressed simply, but with quiet confidence. "Scifi is not my servant. She is a survivor of war," Caleb said. "She deserves the chance to live freely and safely. I ask you to grant her full rights as a person, not as property." The council members listened carefully. Scifi sat beside Caleb, her hands folded, her face calm but strong. After hours of discussion, the council made their decision. Scifi was officially freed. She was granted refugee status and protected by Earth's laws. Caleb and Scifi smiled. But the road ahead was still long. Ciela now had the chance to choose her own path. She wanted to learn more about Earth's ways, to help other refugees like herself, and to find peace. Caleb promised to support her, no matter what she decided. Together, they faced a future filled with hope, challenges, and the chance to rebuild lives broken by war. The months after Ciela's official freedom were both exciting and difficult. Earth was still a strange place for her, full of noises and smells she didn't understand. Every day was a new challenge, but also a new chance to learn. Caleb stayed, by her side, not as a master or protector, but as a friend who wanted to see her succeed. Ciela began volunteering at a center that helped refugees from different planets and worlds. The center was small but full of kindness. People from many places came there seeking help, some from wars, some from poverty, some from lost homes. Ciela listened to their stories and helped translate between different languages, her own knowledge of Zarthan and human languages making her very valuable. She also started attending classes about human laws and rights. She wanted to understand how this world worked so she could help others like her who had no voice. Caleb admired her determination. She had once been trained to obey and serve, but now she was becoming a leader. Caleb, too, found new purpose. After years of feeling lost and broken by the war, he joined a veterans group that helped soldiers heal and find meaning after battle. He shared his story, his pain, and his hope with others. Together, they worked to make sure no one else would be forgotten or left behind. One clear evening, Caleb and Ciela sat on a quiet hill outside the city. The stars above were bright, shining through the cool night air. Caleb looked at her and smiled gently. "You've changed a lot since we met," he said. Ciela returned the smile, soft but real this time. "So have you. I once thought humans were cruel and selfish. Now I see there is kindness, too." Caleb nodded. "It's a hard world, but there are good people in it." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Ciela broke the quiet. "Do you ever regret taking me with you?" Caleb thought carefully. "No. It was difficult at first. I didn't know what to do. But you taught me more than you know. You taught me how to see the world differently." Ciela's eyes shone with gratitude. "And you taught me what it means to be free." Their friendship was not a fairy tale, nor was it perfect. There were days when Ciela missed Zarthan, her family, and the life she once knew. There were times when Caleb struggled with memories that would not fade. But they had something rare, a true connection built on respect and understanding. Ciela's work at the refugee center helped many. She gave talks about the horrors of war and the importance of kindness. People listened, and slowly, attitudes began to change. More communities opened their doors to aliens and refugees. Laws improved. Earth began to become a place of safety for those who once had none. One day, a young girl from Zarthan came to the center, scared and alone. Ciela took her hand, smiled, and whispered, "You're safe now." Caleb watched from a distance, proud of how far Ciela had come. She was no longer a servant or a gift given in war. She was a leader, a teacher, and a friend. And Caleb was no longer just a soldier who survived. He was a man who helped build a better future. The Galactic War had ended years ago, but its echoes remained. For Caleb and Ciela, those echoes shaped a new story, one of healing, hope, and the power of human kindness. They had both lost much, but together they found a new way forward.